Hello, great people. Welcome back to Global Happenings. Today, we are so excited to have you again. There is a particular trend that Arisetv Oseni has brought to limelight, and that trend is that whenever some activists, whether north or south, are in government or are outside the government, let me not just say activists, both activists and politicians, whenever they are not in government, you notice that they are very, very critical. They are always castigating those who are in government, picking the loopholes of the government. They will keep castigating it, getting support from Nigerians and all of that. But immediately they are part of, the government. You notice that they will now observe, the table manners of whenever you are eating, don't talk. But when you are not, when you are not eating, talk. You notice that they start being very quiet. They won't say anything. And that particular trend was brought to limelight by one of Nigeria's favorite journalists, talking about Arisetv Oseni. He says in a tweet, he said some activists from the north are now quiet. The Buhari economic Kwamari wasn't these elevated, but they waxed lyrical and they kept on pounding. Now that they have got advisory position in government, they are quiet. The man dies when he keeps quiet when he ought to speak. I'll take that again. Say the man dies when he keeps quiet when he ought to speak or ought to speak. I think he ought to speak. That was what he was supposed to say. And a lot of reaction trailed it, but shockingly, one of Nigeria's favorite activist who is now in government and who is actually observing table manners of whenever you are eating, don't talk. You can only talk when you are not eating. He came up immediately and decided to respond to Arisetv Oseni's tweet. And the big question is, did Arisetv Oseni mention his name? Now, this is what he had to tell Arisetv Oseni. He said, pity. One would expect people like you, Oseni, to name names. This is cowardly. It is possible that you do not know that serving the nation is not a source of shame. People who are involved in addressing Buhari's Kwamari are miles ahead of those like you who hide behind mics. That was what he had to tell Arisetv Oseni, and a lot of reactions from Nigerians everywhere. People have been talking, and some people just believe that Arisetv ought not to say those things and all of that. But for me, I think it's worthwhile to awaken their consciousness that Nigerians are actually observing. Don't forget that Baba Ahmed was, I think, was a secretary or so, but he was a top guy when it comes to the Northern Elders Forum, and he was always very vocal. I can bear him a lot of weakness. That if you go to some of the key interview platforms, or let me say like channels and the likes, you see him always there lambasting the government, the failures of the government. On the pages of newspapers, you hear him talking about how they have underperformed, naming different places where their performances have been so displeasurable to Nigerians. But right now, he's in government, and I was expecting him to roll out those criticisms, possibly in executive meetings, so that some of those things will be corrected. But just like every other guys who was once there, he's observing table manners. And the big question is why? And Nigerians have reacted to it, but my colleague is in the house and we're going to be talking about it. Some believe that that action or that attitude is tantamount to how patriotic you are to the government, and that patriotism must be above your personal gain or your personal interest, which means whenever you accept to serve the country under certain government who are not performing, you are supposed to keep quiet and just join them. If they are enjoying, you enjoy. If they are crying, you cry. If they are wailing, you wail. If they are jumping, you join them to jump. And my colleague is here. What's your position on all of these that have been mentioned? Oseni just brought it to limelight. Most Nigerians are feeling very uncomfortable with it. But what do you think?
Well, if you ask me, Osen is just saying what Nigerians over time have discovered to be true. Now, everybody wants to, not everybody, most people likes to be in the opposition, so that hopefully if you give them a hearing, if they not enter the ruling party, they could not have their own share. But let's assume, we want to assume that the person in question, or the person who suspects he is the one,
Okay.
because nobody mentioned names. They said the guilty run it while no one pursue it. Nobody, they didn't call his name, like some people who always keep saying about the issue of Atiku Abubakar going to his primary school, and the people there were hailing him, and the next thing, those who supported Bola Ahmed Tinubu on social media started shouting, "What is that? It's not by going to your primary school." The nurse said, "Did they mention name?" They just visited primary school, and another person is taking paracetamol on another person's headache. Did they mention your name? He said, "I just feel like going to my primary school." Why are you bothered? That's the same thing that's happening. So, but let's assume that he meant well. That's an honor to serve the nation. But we're still waiting to see the impact of that honor, because it's not by saying honor and at the end of the day the past government is far better than this government. We need to see impact where he still goofs. It's onus is on you now to now criticize him or advise him, and advise him openly. Let Nigerians know that you are talking. Not to just say, keep quiet and things are going bad. Then after the whole government has finished, like what Soludo did a few days back, when instead of opening up on the issue of the policies of CBN, how it has never happened, so policies were made so that the government of the day should abide by the rules. After President Muhammad Buhari left, now started telling Nigerians how they were printing monies, which is against the policy of CBN and it's causing inflation.
I think the only person who was vocal there was Obaseki. Obaseki
was the only one that was screaming
and said this is totally wrong and all of that. No other person.
Obaseki was screaming, shouting, they are printing money anyhow. These are the things we're talking about. If you want to be in the opposition, fine. If you don't want to be in the main government, when they goof, the way you shouted as opposition, shout. Or if you have advised them, they refuse to take heed your advice, so that your conscience and posterity will judge you fairly. Also say, I advise them so and so, they refuse to take my advice, so that you'll be justified that you honorably serve the nation, but the people you worked with refuse to take your advice as at when due. Other than that, I just feel that it's your turn to shine.
Okay, now I think I kind of understand where you are heading. I feel personally, I think what is going on is when people have the opportunity to serve, it's like an opportunity to have a bite on the national cake. And for that reason, it seems not to talk, because in an ideal society where people are filled with the desire to, serve the nation, and they want to do their best in a little position that they give to them, if their own advice is not heeded, don't resign. If you don't heed the advice, one of these days you just see he has decided to step aside because unfortunately nobody is ready to listen to him.
Especially since he has no control over power.
You understand?
A whole lot of persons, a whole lot of, especially those in diaspora, set up countries, you see them, when they work, they realize they're not getting what they're looking for. The tools available are not favorable in them, then they're unable to use the available tools, and they're not giving them favorable tools. They tender their resignation,
Exactly.
which is very honorable. But you see, in African democracy, especially Nigerian democracy, in fact, resignation is not an option.
Especially when you get a public office like that.
Option.
Yeah.
The only time you hear resignation is when there's a higher dimension of appointment.
Exactly.
So it's not in our Nigerian system to resign. It's as if you're a coward in Nigeria. So when you hear things like resign, they'll tell you, for what? Why should you resign? And you had to chop your own hand. What is that? This is the time for our generation to be made. How can God bless you? They call it blessing. How can God bless you now? You're in the position of power to chop. My brother, I will curse you if you don't do how others are doing. It's not right. But then again, it is a Nigerian factor. So just like Pastor Adeboye will say, let's pray for more righteous people. But then the righteous people, even when they go there, we're not talking about churchy people. When they still get there, you notice that they will say, if you can't beat them, you join them.
All right, that's where we're going to leave it. Let's meet in our comment section. What's your position on all of this? Oseni has spoken his own. Baba Ahmed has also his opinion. But what's your opinion in respect to this trending style in Nigeria, where whenever they are eating in politics.